Where's Joyce?
Yeah, she'll be there.
Hi, everybody. Kim, can we call a meeting to order? Can we call the meeting to order? Do we have a roll call or?
Sure. Wolf Davis?
Here,
Five.
it doesn't matter. It's
I keep
fine.
messing it up.
And you
I'm
will.
embarrassed.
I don't see it changing, so just, I'll answer whenever you say.
All right. You.
So.
Thank you.
I've answered to hate you many times in my life.
Oh, okay.
He
For
said all
me.
the
Okay. Short,
Right here.
Collars,
Here.
and Draco.
Okay, do we have?
You have one.
Thank you. We're gonna do an election for chair and vice chair. Let's start with the chair. Do I have any nominations?
I nominate Joyce King.
I'll second. You can.
She's
Oh.
on the committee right now.
She's not.
Oh, so how do we do that?
You have to nominate one of you for it.
Can I nominate?
You can always change it, Len.
I nominate Kathy Short.
There you go.
Okay, I second.
Okay, you accept?
I do.
Okay.
Okay, now vote for Kathy Short as the chair.
Okay, so do we have a show of hands? Okay. You're in.
Okay, let's do it.
She's gonna take over.
She can take over now and then she can do the election for vice chair.
Okay,
That's fine, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Kathy, for taking the time.
Yes. Absolutely, we can do it. Okay, we gotta keep it going. Is there a motion to nominate a vice chair?
Now can we talk about Joyce?
Until she's back a member, no.
How do we get her to be a member? is
You
my
have to
question.
have the council approve it. So what happened at the last meeting, the council declined to go ahead and give her the position back. She's no longer on the committee because she's no longer a councilor. And that position that she was filling was a council position. So they did make the change to change it to a member position, but they said that she had to reapply. So she filled out her form, she'll be on the January 21st council meeting, but we did open it up for anybody else to apply.
Is there a reason why she can't be in the auditorium now?
She's talking to Christian.
Okay, so she's gonna be able to be here to be a.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
We're not even her to.
And the whole, and so I'd like to, we have restated this. So the reason why Joyce King isn't here right now is because she was the head of this committee, an elected head of this committee, but she was a part of this committee representing the council.
She was a counselor.
And since she's not on city council as of January, that means then that she can't be in that position until she comes through the membership.
Correct,
And in
because
order to come through the membership, then she had to fill out a document, and that form is now in the hands of the city council and will be,
it's in my hands right now
that's great to hear. And so then it's gonna be at the next meeting,
at the January 21st
and
meeting.
then the idea is then they'll say that she can be a member at that time.
I hope.
Can we hold open the vice chair position?
Yeah, you can vote it over.
Yeah, let's do that.
As long as the chair doesn't,
Crow.
yeah.
I really do.
I
Yeah, right.
really was not gonna say it that way,
Right.
but. Okay, all right, yes, you can hold the vice chair.
Okay, we'll do that. Okay, we have a consent agenda. We've got 2 minutes, 2 meeting minutes of October 28th, 24th, and December 9th, 2024. The meetings were excellent. Thank you, Gina. Is there a motion to accept these minutes as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second? So moved and seconded to accept the minutes as submitted. Is there a discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Alrighty, and we've got 2 special ladies with us here. Laura, it looks like you're gonna come up and talk to us first. Is that okay?
Pardon me, there was some suggestion about doing introductions.
Oh,
I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
I thought it came from me. I thought it'd be nice to have introductions because there's some city council members that I'd like for our guests to know who they are.
Oh, okay. You're not required to say who you are, but if you want, that's up to the pleasure of the chair.
Okay, so we're gonna introduce all the audience members?
Whoever wants to introduce themselves, I think.
Okay. Well, who wants to introduce
Well,
themselves?
Laura and Felicia get to do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's true.
I will say,
Well, yeah, I can introduce myself.
I would say we do have a counselor, Counselor Watson.
Yeah, I'm Autumn Watson, I'm city council, and then Fran is as well.
She's also, yeah,
There you
they're here observing. And then we have some folks from Little Whale Cove.
We're from the HOA down there, Little Rock Cove, Ann and Mike Hester.
And does everybody know who these folks are?
I'm Kathy Short, I'm the mayor.
Oh, you actually admitted that.
Thank you.
I'm Randy Collars, on the council, on the task group, as well as on the Green Energy Resiliency Task Group, and also on the Safety Committee at HOA Little Whale Cove.
Karen Andreka, member of this committee, and I live up in Stonebridge.
Depoe, I'm a member of this committee, and then I'm also on the View of the Bay HOA and the chair of our Where Prepared Committee.
Paul, do you want to introduce yourself to folks?
Who are you?
We're just doing introductions.
Paul Calderon, I live in Little Rock Cove.
Okay.
Welcome.
Glad you came.
Okay, thank you very much. We have no old business, so that's good. Anchor storage unit, well, let's do with our, presentations. Come on, Laura. Come on. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
No, I am too, that's why I'm drinking coffee at 3:00.
And
Okay.
she's
Which
new
I'll
to the position.
definitely regret.
Felicia is our first presenter.
Oh, you want Felicia to go?
Oh, no, Felicia. Oh, Felicia. No, Laura's the first presenter. Never mind, let me bring Laura's up.
I think we agreed that I was gonna go
Yeah.
this way.
Let me just
It
bring you
makes
up.
sense with the.
Yeah,
What we do.
That makes sense. Come on up here, Laura.
Where do you want me to stand?
Can you sit in the hot seat right in front of us
Yes,
here? Thank you.
So the presentation will be up there as soon as I get it up there.
I don't need a presentation, I can just wave my arm.
And up there.
Oh, it'll be up there too.
It'll be up top both places.
Oh, that's right.
Alright, yep. So give me a minute here. Technology being the fun thing that it is.
So you guys, okay, so you guys can see it on that too.
It logged itself out. That stupid
I
thing
think I'll
logged
turn off the
itself
light,
out.
so
Can I
we're
reverse
here.
somebody's agenda? I'll bring it right back, I promise. Alright, give me a second, I don't know why I
Just to
logged
show
itself
it the
out.
agenda.
I can introduce myself while we're doing
There you
the technical.
go.
So my name is Laura Gable. Thank you very much for having me and Felicia today. I work for the Oregon Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, which we refer to as DOGARMI. And I have worked with the agency for 14, going on 15 years now, working out of our coastal field office in Newport. And I work on a variety of coastal geologic hazards. Cascadia, earthquake and tsunami is a pretty large portion of my job, but I also work on landslides and coastal erosion, shoreline change kind of work, and anything else exciting that comes up in that regard. So Joyce asked me here to talk about Cascadia earthquake and tsunami preparedness, and also just to give a kind of a primer on the geology of what it is that we're facing. How do we know that we're really facing this thing, and what can we do in part? So I am a scientist, but I do a lot of outreach, and so this is sort of a mix of both. And I'm happy to take questions at any time. I don't mind stopping what I'm talking about. I like to think of slides as more prompts to have a conversation about a certain topic, and if you don't understand something or you have a follow-up question, I'd rather just kind of do it while we're all thinking of it. So,
Pardon me,
Yeah.
Lord, I might have missed it. You said you're a scientist?
yes,
What are you science of, are you geology?
I'm a geologist, technically a geomorphologist, I would say, but geomorphologist, that's, if you wanna sound really impressive, you add more syllables to it.
I know, it's very
Sounds good to
specific.
me.
I loved geology in high school, so I always
Me
considered
too.
a geologist career.
I thought I'd be outside a little more, that's what I tell any children I talk to. I remember the computer 98% of the time. So I guess we can start my presentation. Can you go back one, or can is it playing on its own? Okay.
It's just slow.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to go back to my title slide because this is where I like to start. This is a photo from the 1960 earthquake in Chile. And this is a photo after the largest earthquake that's ever been recorded, 9.2. And these folks lived in this coastal town and they experienced this long earthquake. And it's 1960, there's no sirens, there's no smartphones. They knew to travel and walk on foot up to the hills behind town. And so in the background of the photo, you're seeing the coastal plains and their flooded community post-tsunami. And this country, coastal Chile, has a lived history of earthquakes and tsunamis. They happen frequently enough that this is something that they know happens on their coastline, and they know the very simple plan of if the earth shakes for a significant period of time, and you're at a low-lying area, you go to high ground. And that's all it takes to survive, and they knew to do that. So this is a photo of success. And we do not have a lived history of earthquakes and tsunamis in Oregon here in our written history. And so this is the culture that we are trying to develop right now. We're trying to play catch up to these other countries that have had these more frequently and thus are more aware and comfortable understanding what to do. So sort of along those same lines, why we care about this, we know, and I'll go into how we know why this is something that's going to happen here, even though we have not witnessed it happening here. And a direct corollary to what we can expect here is what happened in Japan in 2011. And so, despite, sometimes I don't like to start with the doom and gloom, but this is a very significant natural hazard that we know we will be experiencing in the Pacific Northwest at some point. And we don't know precisely when, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but we do know it will happen at some point. And it will cause significant devastation, but it is survivable, and it is something that we can plan for. And Japan is an example of a country that is very prepared and has a lot of supports in place at the personal and government level for preparedness. Okay, so I'm gonna go into the geology stuff here. If anybody has any questions, or if you're like, yeah, we know all this, move on, you can do that too. So where do tsunamis come from for us in Oregon? So tsunamis come from subduction zones primarily. There are a couple other sources for tsunamis, but they're not as frequent, they're not as large. There's underwater landslides that can cause tsunamis, and there's also volcanic eruptions, like what happened in Tonga a couple of years ago, that created a tsunami, a local, a significant tsunami locally, but not one that crossed the Pacific Basin. But subduction zones are the primary source for tsunamis, and we live on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, and everyone who lives on the edge of the Pacific Ring, the Pacific Basin, lives on what we call the Ring of Fire. That is because subduction zones ring the Pacific Basin. And I put a little yellow star by where we are in the Pacific Northwest. So subduction zones create tsunamis, and I'll show you how that happens on the next slide. But so we talk about local tsunamis and distant tsunamis. So the detail being, when it's your subduction zone, you get a local tsunami, but we all on the Pacific Basin will get everybody's tsunami, but it'll just be a distant if it's not our subduction zone. So when Japan had an earthquake in 2011, they had a local earthquake and tsunami. We received their distant tsunami about 10 hours later. The Honda volcanic event, we received that tsunami about 18 hours later. Our nearest neighboring subduction zone is the Aleutian Islands, the Aleutian Trench up in Alaska. And it takes a tsunami about 4 hours to travel to the Oregon coast, as it did in 1964 during the Prince William Sound earthquake. So a distant tsunami and a local tsunami, they're both tsunamis, but they have very different characteristics. There's no earthquake for a distant tsunami. It's traveling thousands of miles across the ocean to get to us. We don't feel an earthquake. That means there will be it'll take several hours to get here, 4 at a minimum, if not much longer. The energy levels of the water when it gets to our shorelines is relatively low. It is a low-lying event. It's a beach event, a port and harbor event kind of thing, for the most part. There are some low-lying communities that could be inundated by significant distance tsunami. And because there's no earthquake, there's no impact to our communications, our internet, any other forms of communication with the National Weather Service, that sort of thing. None of that will be impacted. Plenty of ways to be alerted. In 2011, police and fire evacuated the beaches. That's what happened on December 5th as well. You know, our local state parks and police and sheriffs cleared the low-lying areas in case a tsunami was coming. Local tsunami, it's when the Cascadia subduction zone, our friend who's about 60 miles offshore here, has a rupture. We will have an earthquake that will shake the ground for at least 1 minute, if not 3 to 5 minutes. And then a tsunami will be coming in tens of minutes after that. That tsunami will then be a distant tsunami for everybody else around the Pacific Basin. So the energy levels are much higher. The water does not have very far to travel before it reaches the coastline. So there's significant inundation, extensive flooding, and higher velocities of that water. And warning systems will be ineffective for the most part. And that is why we do so much education on making sure that people understand that if there is an earthquake that shakes for more than a minute, you need to assume that a tsunami is on its way. It may not be, but you need to assume that it is and know to get to high ground and to know what that means for the location you're in. And so we talk a lot about personal preparedness, but then also signage and, you know, how you can help in the moment. So this is a cross-section of the Cascadia subduction zone, and I show this to illustrate how a tsunami is actually generated. So the crust is broken up into a collection of tectonic plates that are constantly being pushed and pulled around. And this is a location where two plates are coming together. And what happens when two plates are coming together is one ends up being on top and one ends up being below. Just, you know, they gotta go somewhere. So in this case, the Juan de Fuca plate, which is just a little remnant of the larger Pacific plate, is going underneath the North American plate. And we are sitting on the North American plate. So they are coming together at a rate of about 1.5 inches per year. But that's an average rate over time. And what's actually happening is that contact between the two plates is so, full of friction that it's stuck and nothing's sliding past itself at all. It's what we call stuck or the locked zone. And you can see that it's kind of drawn in red on that line down below. So I guess let me take a step back. So when we talk about the subduction zone, oftentimes you're looking at a map and you're looking at that line that's in the ocean that sort of runs parallel to our coastline, sub-parallel. That's where the two plates kind of daylight. That's where the tip of the North American plate is there. That's about 60 miles offshore here. It's a lot closer to the coast down in southern Oregon and northern California. But you know, that fault line, it's not just a line, it's a surface. And so it's about 15 miles underneath our feet here is where that locked zone is. And then you can see volcanoes always come along the subduction zones further down where the Juan de Fuca plate is subducted further into the mantle, and that's what the Cascades are. And that's what the Japan Islands are, and the Aleutian Islands are, and so on. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so how does the subduction zone actually make a tsunami? This is a cartoon from the USGS that demonstrates it really nicely. You can also, you know, Google this and look at it closer. But so the first one on the left is just showing you a vertical slice through a generic subduction zone. So I added you are here, we're right at the water line on the coast. And we're on the overriding plate, we're on the plate that floats up high, and the subducting plate's going below, but it's stuck in that front area there because there's so much contact between the two. So between earthquakes, the two plates are being pushed together, but they're not sliding. And so what happens is the leading edge of the North American plate actually is being pulled kind of like down and inward, like eastward. And that's causing where we are currently right now to basically thicken. It's getting squeezed, and we're going up at a rate of about 1 millimeter per year, really, really nominal. And then eventually, the amount of strain that's accumulating on that fall, it becomes too much. Just like anything, you bend it, you have a stick and you bend it, eventually it will snap. And so eventually that stuck area ruptures and marches forward some amount, some tens of feet, 50 feet, whatever it may be, in an earthquake. And that energy that's released is the earthquake. It is rock sliding past rock. And that the fact that these earthquakes are so long is because we're talking about a subduction zone that's 600 miles long from Cape Mendocino in the south in California to Vancouver Island in the north. and it's so many miles, it simply takes time for it to rupture all the way up. And that is what the actual shaking is. And so what's also happening at the same time, so that rock is sliding past, the North American plate is finally happy to jump forward a little bit. And that leading edge of the North American plate, sort of like a diving board, it snaps upward. So we snap down a little bit on the coast, we will subside by a few feet. And the leading edge pops up, and that leading edge is underwater. So it uplifts the water that's sitting on top of the seafloor there. So that uplifted column of water then collapses, just like throwing a rock in a pond, just like ripple waves, and it ripples out in all directions and begins its travel to the coastline and the rest of the Pacific Basin. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can you clarify that more? So you say we would uplift, because I'm seeing you're doing a great job describing. So when you say, so when this happens, so then we go up, say that again.
So right now, in between earthquakes, we are slowly going up, a very, very small amount.
Okay.
And during the earthquake, there will be essentially an instantaneous lowering of the land level
Okay.
where we are. We won't feel it because it's gonna happen at a regional scale. We won't see it because it'll look the same, but it'll all go down. We'll see it in the GPS after the fact. But our sea level will change, right? The water level globally isn't changing, and so we will have a new sea level post Cascadia. It will feel like sea level has risen some amount, and that will be effectively permanent. It will readjust over, a decade or two following the event. But yeah, we will have a new normal sea level that will be slightly higher. Does that make sense?
Will that change our shoreline?
Yes, extremely. And we don't quite know how, because there will be dynamics, all the hydraulic tidal dynamics will be totally out of whack. Our jetties will be destroyed by the tsunami and the earthquake probably. And so there will be lots of things at play that will change the shape of our shoreline after the event. But that new relative sea level will also play a large role in that.
Is that what causes the liquefaction, or is that totally different?
No, that's a great question. Liquefaction is a phenomenon that occurs during an earthquake.
Right.
And it's when you have saturated soils that are shaken and have the right, so by saturated, I mean there's water in there.
Right.
And it's the right grain size, and you have a weakening of the soil, and it no longer can support, say, a foundation of a building on top of it. And there's very famous photos of liquefaction from like Mexico City earthquake and Japanese earthquakes where you see buildings just they aren't broken, but they fell over because it was all of a sudden like they were built on beach sand. So liquefaction will also, we expect liquefaction to occur during the earthquake shaking. As soon as the shaking stops, the liquefaction phenomenon also stops. It's a very site-specific thing though. It will not blanket happen everywhere to all of us. It's bits and pieces here and there.
So our basalt, the fact that we're basalt, Depoe Bay is because of how we are, so that kind of is an insulator against the
Yes.
liquefaction.
Very much so.
Okay, right. The closest liquefaction area is still us?
Well,
No,
I
okay.
don't think about that, but.
No, right, but you see why I
But
said.
Depoe Bay is great for that, right? It's
we
on
were
the salt, you're up
That's
high.
So we don't have that grain in there, okay, great, okay, okay, good.
Except that my home is built on landfill from the harbor. So I'm thinking it's gonna be back in the harbor.
They're not, I mean, don't hold me on this.
No.
It's very site specific, and I'm sure there will be, the harbor, and I mean, you've got water, you've got the high water, with water table at sea level here.
Yeah.
I suspect there will be spots, And liquefaction doesn't have to mean a
Right.
huge
Right.
quicksand, whole buildings falling in. If you look at photos from the Christchurch earthquake of 2011, it was like they created little sand boils on the streets. And so you ended up with standing water and mud and sand just like on the streets. And from my perspective, when I think about evacuation from a Cascadia earthquake and tsunami And I think about liquefaction, I think about how it will slow us down when we're walking, but I don't really think about it as we don't have huge cities with huge, 10-story apartment buildings built on them. We do, in some instances, we have some larger buildings, of course.
But they're actually further north, and further up those areas, or further north from the basalt.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Laura,
Yes.
will your slides be available to us?
Yeah, we can do that.
Very
That'd be great.
The other ones on the website, but because I got these later, they haven't been posted yet, but Gina will post them.
Good, thank you.
Okay, so Japan is the most prepared earthquake country and tsunami country in the world. They have the best technology when it comes to earthquake early warning and seismic monitoring. They have evacuation drills in many communities across the islands. They've had enough of these, or they've also been keeping written records for a very, very, very long time. And one of the things that they do to prepare people for the next tsunami is tsunami stones that mark the edge of inundation. And this is from a tsunami that occurred in the year 869. It's one of the, I think, the major predecessor to the 2011 earthquake. And we talk about how we just do not have this lived history that Japan does. And so what we can do is learn from Japan and try to figure out for ourselves what we can anticipate will be what the hazard will look like here.
In this case, is that basically the salt stone showing the height of the water?
It's like the furthest inland the water went in that location.
Oh, wow.
And so then that sign, that sign says this was the furthest that water traveled
Okay.
in this event. And it's sort of the equivalent of our blue lines that we've drawn on our roads. It's a little more,
Were you a part of that blue line drawing?
Well, the cities and counties have done that, but we certainly worked with those jurisdictions. Yeah. So while we were not keeping a written record of what was happening here in the Pacific Northwest, Native Americans were living here at the time of the last Cascadia event. And in fact, archaeologists have figured out that Native Americans have probably lived in the Pacific Northwest long enough to experience multiple cycles of Cascadia earthquakes and tsunamis. And this was sort of in the emergence of plate tectonics as a reality in the 80s. And then scientists discovering that we had a subduction zone offshore of the Pacific Northwest, and then realizing that it's not dormant, but that it just is very, very locked and just is very quiet at the moment. Discovering that they could kind of dig into this wealth of information from the Native American oral stories and drawings and things, and learned that, they learned a lot about the 1700 event from really interviewing multiple tribal groups up and down the Pacific Northwest coastline to hear what their stories were from their ancestors and piecing it all together. And it's what helped refine our understanding of the most recent Cascadia event, which happened in 1700 that it hit at night. That's a part of the stories that they learned from interviewing the Native Americans. So in Cascadia, our warning comes not from tsunami stones reminding everybody where the last one went to, but paleoseismology, which is a science that studies past earthquakes. So they're detectives, and they're just looking for any evidence they can to find information on when the last earthquakes happened and how their extent, what areas they affected. And so this is maybe the most famous image that proves evidence of the 1700 earthquake, Cascadia earthquake and tsunami, which is up in the Copalis River in southwestern Washington. And this is a stand of western red cedar snags. And cedar is resistant to decay. And so it turns out that they dated these trees and they all died in the same growing season about 300 years ago. And they were able to refine it and figure out it was the year 1700 or 1701, that next year, that they died. And it is because that land level drop I was describing during the earthquake, it went from being above the tidal regime to in the tidal regime, and it died from being in the brackish water. So Brian Atwater is one of the primary Cascadia scientists who's been working here for several decades, leading the way in understanding Cascadia. And that's his photo from a publication in 2005. So this is a very brief summary of what paleoseismology really entails. So you can look for evidence of past Cascadia earthquakes onshore and offshore. So the two squares on the left show what happens offshore. So when you have a subduction zone earthquake, you have this shaking that goes from Northern California all the way to Vancouver Island, and you're shaking the continental shelf. So you have landslides, submarine landslides that destabilize the sediments that then rush down the submarine canyons down the steep edge of the continental slope, and they settle at the bottom. And those are called turbidite deposits. So every time you have one of these earthquakes, you have these underwater landslides, and it shakes all this debris, and it lays down on the ocean bottom in a mess, a disorganized mess. Regular ocean bottom sedimentation is very not messy. It's very uniform. Grain sizes are very normal. And so Chris Goldfinger, a retired professor at OSU, went out, and many others, of course, and took cores from the ocean bottom, all up and down the whole length of the subduction zone. And this photo shows one of those cores, and every time you see the darker line, that's one of those turbidites. And he could date material in those turbidite layers as best he could, and he could also tie them together the same size of turbidites and with the same relative ages all the way along the subduction zone. And so how else could you have these underwater landslides with the same timing along 600 miles of coastline, a subduction zone earthquake? So that's the large, you can go back 10,000 years.
Wow.
And you can do something similar on land. And so what many scientists have done is gone into the coastal marshes all up and down the Pacific Northwest and have done the same thing, taken cores. And so what you have is normal marsh sedimentation patterns, the sands and muds and soils. And when you have an earthquake, you have that land level drop of several feet. And so what you'll do is you'll take a forest that's out of the tidal regime and you'll drop it into the tidal regime. And then a few minutes later, you will have a tsunami come and wash over that marsh and drop a bunch of marine sand that it picked up on its way in, and it'll drop it. And then life goes back to normal. That marsh goes back to its normal sedimentation patterns until the cycle repeats. So you can go into the marshes and take cores and look for these patterns, and what you will find is first you'll find a buried soil, because it was once the marsh floor with lots of carbon-based plant matter, and you will find a buried soil, so it will be a very rich black layer with a lot of organic material in it, followed by a sharp line and then sand, where you wouldn't expect to see sand otherwise. So when you see that packet of the buried soil, a sharp line, which is the tsunami kind of scouring the surface, and then sand, which you can look at under a microscope and confirm it's marine sand and not river sand from a river. You can do the same thing, and you can go back 6,000, 8,000 years in some marshes, and you can find tsunamis. And you can estimate how much land level drop there was in a given earthquake and the extent of the inundation that was preserved. You can track the sand up the river and up the estuaries to try and see how far the flooding went. Now, they're not always preserved, so it's not a perfect science. And you spend most of your time failing miserably, but you just keep poking holes all summer long,
Yes. Did I read somewhere recently that they had gone further up and taken core samples and found sand had traveled up via a tsunami farther than they had originally discovered?
It was on the Salmon River, I think,
Yeah,
where
that's what I saw.
which is, the Salmon River is, that's what they're doing. They didn't say how far up it went when they were doing the investigation.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, but yeah, I mean,
They're doing core samples just to see what they can find out.
yeah, people are constantly, there's USGS has led the effort to collect all the work that everyone's been doing, including Giovanni, of collecting core samples from marshes, and because it's really a team effort. We gotta, people have been working in different estuaries for decades now and putting the whole story together and looking at it as a whole and constantly pushing, like, where haven't we looked, and where have we looked and it was a bad place and nobody else should really bother looking there because it didn't preserve anything. And so, yeah. So that's my summary of paleoseismology, and this is what it culminated in is we have what we believe is a 10,000-year record of earthquakes on Cascadia. So this is a retired colleague of mine who probably many of you have heard his name, Ian Maiden. And he put this timeline together, which basically he put events in human history along the top, and then those red bars represent all of the earthquakes that have occurred on Cascadia in the last 10,000 years. So the bigger bars are a 9.0-ish earthquake, a full margin rupture, all 600 miles of it. And then the smaller red bars are where some portion of it, but not the whole thing, likely ruptured. And so we're still talking about a magnitude 8, still a significant reduction in earthquake, but not the full margin. And so in total, it's about 40 earthquakes, half these full margin, 19 full margin ruptures, and the rest are some fraction. And it'll be more fun to look at it close up and see, just how far back it goes. The first use of the wheel, the pyramid, Stonehenge, the first wine made, of course, Ian put on there. And so I guess the point is, sometimes I forget to point this out, on the very right side of that timeline is now. It says you are here. That is the last earthquake, if you start looking to the left, was the last Cascadia earthquake was on January 26th, the year 1700, and it hit at about 9 p.m.
So you think about how frightening that would be in the dark, which is not cool.
But I will say that a lot of tribes, it turns out, didn't live down at sea level. They lived up high, and it's believed that they understood from this information being shared down through the generations. Not a great place to sleep. Come down.
Instead, we get closer.
Yes, we do.
With more permanent structures.
Yeah, we get closer to the ocean edge, yeah.
So, okay, so, we want to know when the next one's gonna happen. And one thing I will say about that timeline I just showed you, there's no statistically significant pattern to the frequency with which these things occur. How much of a gap there is in between them, and whether they're a full margin or a partial rupture. There's no pattern that you can hang your hat on. You can calculate an average, you can calculate many different kinds of averages and get a number, and you'll hear people talk about being in the window, or it's a 500-year average. And those numbers aren't wrong, but they just don't tell the full story. So when will the next earthquake happen? Well, we can look back and say that there have been 19 magnitude 9 earthquakes over the last 10,000 years. And the range, that inter-event timing, can range from 100 years to 1,100 years, which I know is maddening. The last one was 325 years ago now, and so we're in the window. But it could be, many hundreds of years. So over the past that says 300 years with a comma, that should be 3,000 years. It is about a 500-year average recurrence if you only look at the last 3,000 years, with the last one happening in 1700. And I have a bullet in there about the notable distant tsunami event for Oregon with the 1964 earthquake. So Chris Goldfinger has predicted, based on this data, that there is a 16 to 22% chance of a full margin rupture in the next 50 years. That likelihood goes up when you're talking about an earthquake that only affects the northern California and southern Oregon coast to 37 to 43%. So probabilistic tsunami, assessing tsunamis from a probabilistic standpoint, like we do floods, let's say 100-year flood, 500-year flood. We're just pursuing that now as a nation, figuring that out. But what Dogami did with a team of scientists that were outside of Dogami too, they collected, experts in all the different fields that needed to be done to do tsunami modeling back in 2009 to 2013. So they put a team together to design some tsunami inundation modeling that would represent all the reasonable expectations we have for Cascadia. What is the next earthquake? Could it look like? And what would the inundation from that look like? And so basically, this is called deterministic modeling. So we took known parameters and kind of put them in categories, which we call t-shirt sizes: small, medium, large, extra large, and extra, extra large. And it's based on those 19 full margin ruptures And so we looked at how long that interevent time was between those. And the longer the time is between the two, the more strain builds up, and so the larger the next earthquake could be. So that played into how we defined the extra large versus the small and medium. And so this graph is a little busy and I won't go into it too much, but basically one of the patterns that you can see, even though there's no statistically significant pattern, is that there are smaller but more frequent, so there are many more smaller tsunamis and there are many fewer of the big ones. That's how things work in nature generally. And so that sort of also helps drive how we defined what we call our t-shirt sizes of earthquake and tsunami. And when I'm saying it's small though, I'm still talking about an 8.9. It's not small, but it's just, so, and it's from this work that we developed the evacuation maps that we rolled out around the 2010, 2013 timeframe for the whole Oregon coast. The look and feel of these maps, the fact that they have both a distant tsunami zone and a local tsunami zone, that was decided upon by a tsunami advisory council, which was comprised of local government officials, emergency managers, police and fire, and a variety of people. And that is what we still use today. So orange represents the distant tsunami, and then, which is a credible maximum scenario from Alaska. And then our XXL, our most conservative, largest one we modeled, was chosen to be the local tsunami zone for the state of Oregon. It's conservative because it's for life safety purposes.
Are you going to be answering this question later, or I've been hearing that these have been redrawn or in the process of being redrawn?
They're not.
Okay, thank you.
I promise that we're very careful that, there's still so much work to be done to educate people, and the extent of the size of these zones where they are and are not is very sensitive, a very sensitive subject for lots of reasons. And, this work was thoroughly vetted before, during, and after it was done. And we traveled up and down the coast to every community to talk about this work and talk about the modeling and the science that was behind it and what's drawn on these maps, the assembly areas and things like that. So any next generation of evacuation maps will undergo a very similar process. And now we make other map products, we're working on other things, and that doesn't change what the zones are. We do have other map products, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but just know that these zones, evacuation zones, tsunami zones will not change. You will know if we're updating those maps, and it will be a large effort that will be done coastwide.
Or they might be referring to, recently Lincoln County went through an exercise to update their evacuation plan for the county.
Yes.
And Depoe Bay was considered priority. I meant to give you guys a copy of it, we got it.
We got the report?
Oh, we have it.
Now, was that from U of O or OSU?
OSU, Nova.
U of O.
U of O.
So, they're still finishing up the Lincoln County one, but we did get the Depoe Bay one, so I'll make sure you guys get a copy of that. I just forgot to give it to you, print it out. So
You'll send it
that,
in an email.
yeah, but that might be what you're referring to, because we had talked about it before and they were involved in some of the discussions.
I went to one or two of their meetings, and that was it.
But it's not gonna be,
They're not changing any maps.
it's not, I was gonna say, it's not gonna be what you think it's gonna be.
So I just thought I'd take a moment we could just look at what the XXL tsunami zone looks like in Depoe Bay. I know you have all looked at this before, but I will say that Depoe Bay, has relative to other communities, has a really narrow inundation zone, which is good news in a lot of ways. High ground for anyone that is in that zone, that high ground is very nearby, it's very accessible, lots of roads intersect that high ground. The salt is less likely to be impacted during the earthquake, by landslide type activities. The damage from the tsunami as far as rebuilding post-event will be much smaller than other communities that have wider tsunami zones. And if the tsunami is not an XXL tsunami and is something less, then the zone will be even more diminished, that will have been impacted. Now the earthquake will cause lots of road failures, as you know. And Depoe Bay,
It's gonna be guys.
you will be isolated and on all sides. And as we all will, I mean, in Newport, I mean, we all will, and there's been lots of work, as I'm sure you're familiar with, Oregon Emergency Management and now Oregon Office of Resilience and Emergency Management out of Oregon Department of Human Services, so many acronyms. There's lots of islanding efforts going on and recognizing these zones of isolation, but also just, self-sufficiency that will be needed. And Depoe Bay will be, isolated for some time, and then it'll, as time goes on, there will be access to Lincoln City, and then obviously Lincoln City, then there will be access into the valley, and that sort of thing. But that's my general thought about that. So I just wanted to throw in here, so OregonTsunami.org, www.oregontsunami.org. It's not working, we don't have W's. That's our clearinghouse. There's more information there than you could possibly want. And so everything I'm talking about, all these evacuation maps, and things I'm gonna talk about coming up, they're all available on this website. So, and you're always welcome to email me if you're like, I'm looking at this and I don't know,
That's great work. This is wonderful, thank you so much.
Good, okay.
We appreciate it.
So, your evacuation map is a perfect example of one where when we made these maps in 2010, there's just things we weren't aware of that we are now, such as they're hard and costly to reproduce at strange sizes, like by 12 inches, 12 inches by 27 inches. So no one can print that at home, and it's at a scale that's not so great to resolve individual streets and homes to really examine your evacuation route. So very quickly, we were starting to realize that, and so we got this stuff online. Obviously, that's where everyone lives these days, and so we have an online tool. It's not hosted by Giovanni's website, it's hosted by NANUS, which is a consortium of ocean scientists that my colleague, Dr. Jonathan Allen, is a part of, and so they host our website, and you can get to it from the clearinghouse that I just gave. The website I just gave you, it's the top link from that is to go here. And so this website will show you can punch in an address or click on the map and it'll say you're in the local tsunami zone, or you're in the distant tsunami zone, or you're outside of the tsunami zone. Now what it can do, in the past several years, we've incorporated evacuation routes into it. So now when you punch in a specific location, whether by clicking or typing in an address, you get a turn-by-turn path to safety as you would on Google Maps, and then the actual written instructions for what those turns are and how fast you have to travel in order to get to that location ahead of the tsunami. In some locations, I didn't talk about this, the wave is expected to arrive, the tsunami is expected to arrive in Depoe Bay 20 minutes after the earthquake shaking begins. Just FYI, and that's based on models, it's not an exact science, but it gives you an idea. So that information is incorporated into whether we're predicting a certain route needs to walk, jog, or run. Depoe Bay, 100% of Depoe Bay is walk because high ground is so close to every spot within the tsunami zone. But this is a screenshot of that website.
And this is because I know some people have been confused when I've talked about it. They see this and they think this is gonna get me out of town, out of the way. But we're talking about immediate evacuation, like in 10 to 20 minutes, as opposed to getting me tomorrow to, or getting to a hotel because I don't have power or all that kind of stuff.
That's a great point. And so Felicia and I talk about this a lot of just, there's different levels of evacuation.
Right.
And, in this very, very precious amount of 20 minutes, minus the minutes that your drop cover holds for the earthquake, you need to get to green, whatever that is, your nearest high ground. Because nothing else, it doesn't matter if you don't make it to green in that day, and then there's that other time. Even assembly areas, we've had people think, well, I can't reach that black and white A I see on my map. And so I'm not gonna bother doing anything, and we realize, no, actually, that's wonderful if you can reach an assembly area, but that's secondary, right? Primary is just getting to high ground. Secondarily, it's great to be with other people, collective assembly areas, and then beyond that, can you get off the coast, that gets into days and weeks and months after the event. And that messaging though, and we learned in the December 5th event, how convoluted and confused, and we heard many people who were thinking that they needed to get out of the county, and, that could cause traffic jams and car accidents. We also haven't really talked about like traveling on foot versus a car. The official messaging is you evacuate on foot for the Cascadia event. The earthquake will make roads difficult to pass, and people won't be thinking clearly when they're driving, and
I had a neighbor ask me just last week, so do we have access, do we have the keys to get through that logging road up there? And I'm like, no, the trees are gonna be down, don't expect to drive out.
And it's already.
Well, I heard we can drive to Salem.
It's already happened, right? Now, that is.
you could walk to Salem.
You could walk to Salem.
But you still better have a good chainsaw that's fueled up.
And that's the kind of thing that at the city and county level, and I'll show you coming up some of the work we've been doing. It's information to help you think about those things. And so we'll just go to it. Okay, so this, actually, we're there now. Okay, so John and my other colleague Fletch have been putting together what we call earthquake and tsunami impact analyses. So we published Lincoln County's back in 2021, and it's available for your reading pleasure on our website. And we then have updated it. It's not out yet. It's going to be out any day. So the work in 2021 used 2010 census data, and we used it and we've updated it to 2020 census data, which we're very excited about. I realize it doesn't sound that exciting. No. But so I'm going to go through. So this is what we call a community profile we designed, and it's meant to be a snapshot for each community in the county, using the urban growth boundary as a boundary limits for counting things. Information on how the earthquake and tsunami will impact your community, both in terms of people, casualties, and dollar amounts and building losses and things like that. So I'm gonna go the next, don't try to read that. But so this is a snapshot from the new publication, the 2025 publication that will be out very shortly, but it doesn't have a URL yet because it's not out yet, but it will be soon. So if you go to the next slide, you can. Okay, so I'm just gonna step through some of the boxes from that profile. And again, what I'm gonna go through here, these aren't like accurate to the number, right? This is estimates using, so FEMA has a tool called HAZUS that will estimate casualties and building damage to a variety of natural hazards. And they have developed a tsunami module. Their bread and butter is flooding. But they have a tsunami module now, and that's what we've been using. And it's meant to provide a snapshot of the community and what are its vulnerabilities and what are its strengths and where can we focus our energy. So here is a summary of the demographics of Depoe Bay based on the UGB. And there are, one more thing. So the population, the census data, so we have also a very robust data set of all the buildings in the community and what their occupancy type is, residential versus commercial, agriculture, all those categories. And so what we do is we take that census data and we distribute those people based on census tract and whether the buildings are residential or not. And so we're putting these people in our model in the tsunami zone. And then we're also we're providing an estimate of how many visitors may be in the community at the time of the event by identifying every hotel, motel, campground, RV park to full capacity. Right. So that's it's a rough number, but it's meant to start to think about how many people you're really potentially gonna be dealing with post-event. And so in Depoe Bay's case, we estimate using that 2020 census data, about 540 permanent residents in the tsunami zone, sleeping in the tsunami zone.
Actually, in the tsunami zone.
In the tsunami zone. And then another 1,000 or so people in hotels and motels. We do also, there's a little bit of second home captured in that, but it's not full, but it gets at it a little bit. So about 25% of those permanent and temporary people out of the whole urban growth boundary UGB are in the tsunami zone. And then the demographics of those people in the tsunami zone, about 30% are over 65 years of age, which we use as a very rough proxy for folks that maybe cannot travel as fast And so I'll show you in a second when you think about walking speeds to high ground, that can play a factor.
And just to clarify, this is really focusing on just those in the tsunami zone, knowing that there's also probably triple that population that are gonna be affected, but not in the zone. They're gonna be affected by no power, no transportation, all these people fleeing, all that stuff. So,
And actually, I do have one, I can show you one number here in a slide or two that will get to that a little bit.
oh, good,
A
cause
little bit, yeah.
I had made an estimate just the other day with counting and stuff and got anywhere from 4,000 to 6,000 that would be impacted.
That sounds right.
What did you use for your tourist number, or not resident number, 540 for in the thing, and what did you say?
It was like 1,000.
1,000, that's what I thought.
And that's in the tsunami zone.
That's what it is, yeah, got it.
Specifically.
Yeah, right, perfect.
So this is a little technical, but I think it can be really beneficial in planning for things like specifically tsunami catches. So we have in our modeling, what is the nearest point of safety for everybody in the community? So then you can draw a boundary around a neighborhood that all goes to the same, so we call those flow zones, like an evacuation flow zone is the extent of an area that all goes to the same place. So now you're starting to be, and then we can tell you, so this is a map and the zones are broken up sort of awkwardly. I would actually like to cut them up a little more, but I can tell you that in say zone A, or zone B at the world mark or whatever, we can count how many people will be evacuated to that location. And then you can start to plan how big do these caches need to be? How many people potentially could be at that site in the hours and then day afterwards? What are we thinking about? What are we paying for? Not just how many like supplies, but there's supplies and there's also, I don't think it's really a concern here, but there have been other communities where the high ground, the point of high ground is like a really tight, narrow street with dense forests right behind it, and can it really handle, 2,000 potentially people?
So the term that you guys are using, zone, is the term that we've heard islands, is that kind of similar, or are zones on the way to the islands, or totally unrelated?
I was afraid you were gonna ask about it, zones versus tsunami zones, and I'm instantly thinking, oh gosh, maybe we
Zones
should have
versus
said
the
flow zones.
islands, versus the islands.
Yeah, it's not really, I mean, it kind of is islands, but, I would say there are some places where that nearest, oh, actually, here's an example, so, I don't really wanna have him go back, but there's another island,
And just to
there's
clarify.
a green island of there's a hill of high ground, right, at the world mark there, or wherever, somewhere near there.
Yeah.
I call those islands of high ground.
Okay.
But anybody that evacuates there will survive the tsunami, and then they will be on a little island for a day. Then the tsunami is over, and then they will be they can rejoin the community as a whole. So for the first 24 hours, they will be on their own in that spot. All the other places where roads intersect with safety in Depoe Bay, it's all contiguous. So, anybody could be walking and no one up north there is stuck and they can't come south and be with other people further to the south. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and
That
part
first
of
day.
the understanding of islands that got from the previous workshops were that were, first of all, for those who aren't familiar with the terminology they're using, it's not literally surrounded by water, an island, as much as access to or from, leaving or remaining. So the terminology, at least my understanding has been, is that an island means when it's all over, you're an island in terms of you can't leave, people can't get to you. And so that's where we get to the idea of caches and stuff like this. Okay, great.
And I didn't really talk about this, but the tsunami will arrive in 20 minutes approximately, and then waves will continue to impact the open coast and the harbor for 12 to 24 hours. And so the official messaging from Oregon Emergency Management is, to stay in the green out high ground until you get some sort of all clear notification from, police or fire or however else that somebody gets a weather radio, kind of thing.
Just out of curiosity, is it typical, is there a way to even know, is it typical that there's one huge wave, and it's just one. Followed by maybe smaller ones, and of course the backflow and the forward flow, or is it also possible to get like 2 or 3 huge ones?
You just get one from the initial
Okay, so,
declination of the seafloor. But like you were just saying, now, I don't think Depoe Bay, I haven't looked at an animation of the modeling ahead of this to think about it, it'll do it here, but like in Yaquina estuary, these tsunamis come in and then ring like bells. And every 20 minutes or however, 30 minutes, another wave is coming in behind it. And even though maybe out in the open ocean, each wave is slightly smaller than the next, they start superimposing and adding up, and they get kind of trapped just like any other kind of energetic wave situation. And you'll have that highest water level back in the bay somewhere. It might not be with that initial surge, but it could be hours later. In Depoe Bay, I don't anticipate that quite so much. I anticipate it being more like the initial surge will be the highest everything, and then it will be progressively less.
And then there's the receipts, it's just as the receiving water is also something too. You don't think, oh, that's it, because it's gonna receive back out.
Yeah,
Oh, can I say something?
Yes, oh, please, yeah.
The second wave in Depoe Bay was what caused the damage to the docks, not the first one.
that's a great point. Yeah, it really does, because what's happening is they're interacting with each other. So the outflow and inflow are adding and subtracting, and they can create elevated water levels and current velocities. So, yeah, and they also, when you look at animations and when you look at, what really happened in Japan and other places, they do wild things, like they look like a slinky, the waves will kind of slinky their way up the open coast, and do all sorts of wild things. But actually, you talk about the recession, that is something in Sumatra in 2004, famously, the leading edge of the tsunami was when you think of a wave, you have peaks and troughs, it was a trough. And so what you saw with your eyes and what the people in Thailand and Sumatra saw was a drawdown, and all this like ocean bottom was exposed and people were curious. That isn't necessarily going to happen. Some people are like, oh, if you see the water drawdown, that depends on the geometry of the fault, and we can't say for certain what it's gonna look like. It could lead with a trough, or it could lead with a crest and just be an addition. Okay. So this is another thing from that community profile. So anyway, do you understand what those flow zones are? We can talk more about that, but anyway, the point is just to kind of cut the town up into pieces and really dig into like who's gonna be where and what are they gonna need based on where we're talking. Like heavily visitor versus heavily local, that sort of thing. We also have estimates on casualties. Depoe Bay, because it has such a narrow inundation zone, the access on these is really low. So there are some fatalities that this tool estimates, but again, this is a tool, it's meant to provide kind of a very first order look at things. And I don't actually love the bar charts on this, I don't think they're helpful just looking at the numbers, but they estimate 80 injuries from the earthquake and 10 fatalities from the tsunami. And again, those numbers are so low, they're within the error of the tool itself. But in general, we don't anticipate the earthquake being the main source of fatalities. It was not in Japan. The way our buildings are built these days, they're not doing what buildings do in earthquakes in places like Turkey or Haiti. They don't just fall down from them. It depends on the building, of course, but like predominantly our building stock is wood-based and flexes during earthquakes. But displaced populations, we have an estimate of what we're calling displaced populations, which is people whose homes are considered damaged enough in this FEMA tool to not be able to live in it from the earthquake. Obviously, everything in the tsunami zone out, and then anything outside of the tsunami zone but inside the urban growth boundary that's been damaged due to the shaking, they're counted in this displaced population, and that is 2,000, which is a much lower number than what you had guessed. And if you want, we can, like, another time, do a remote meeting and, nerd out on all of it.
Well, again, that's displaced people from the tsunami zone.
I think that might be from the earthquake too. I'll have to be. We'll have to double check that. But the point is, what I wanted to do with this was like at least introduce you to this work and explain it enough that you see the possibility of being able to use it for your own plans. Also, I want to throw out that you guys can use this for grants. This is justification for we need this many supplies or, you know, like this much for whatever it is that you're planning for, whether it's mass care, mass shelter, all the different pieces. Okay, so we have some summary numbers for infrastructure effects from the tsunami and earthquake. So top left, number of buildings in the tsunami zone, 348 buildings. Bottom left, the value of those buildings, as FEMA says, the building replacement cost for all the buildings in the tsunami zone is $140 million. On the right.
Was that before LA?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I'm sure FEMA's hazardous tools being used very much right now, for what's happening down there. Okay, the top right, earthquake losses. These are much bigger numbers, so earthquake losses, so it's 42 million in the tsunami zone, which is sort of silly because the earthquake damages buildings and then the tsunami comes. And then the rest of the community, it's just about 50 million. And then also we have an estimate of the contents of the building to sort of just bring that number up to something that's approaching what is real versus a very underestimate of just dollar amounts that again can be used as justification for different efforts you may want to pursue, different planning efforts. And then total building losses. So anyway, okay. And then one last thing that FEMA's hazardous tool can estimate is debris. So management of debris after the event. The tsunami, the inundation zone, and outside the inundation zone, what the earthquake has damaged. There will be a lot to deal with. And debris management is something that Oregon Emergency Management is working on a guidance document, learning from what was done in Japan and other places, and putting together some tools for cities and counties to use to start planning how they're going to deal with that debris. HAZIS provides some very low estimates for that. There's a lot that it's not including, but at least it gets you thinking about it. And I included the map here as well because I thought, so it's 21,000 tons of debris, and that's basically just based on the building stock data that we have. It doesn't count trees and cars and contents of the buildings, anything like that. And that equates to, move the decimal over, assuming 10 cubic yards per dump truck, and it's like, so it's like 2,000 dump trucks worth of debris. And this map shows roughly in Depoe Bay, in the tsunami zone, where that debris is estimated to be located. And I thought this one was kind of interesting because it's heavily on the north end as opposed to the south end.
Right.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing.
Yeah.
So I won't go into this. I know I've thrown a lot of data at you, but the new publication that's coming out has county-wide summaries, which I thought you can dig into that another time, but just so you know, we did it for the whole coast, so we have all the counties, and we read, the original publications were just one county at a time. This one now is all the counties using the best available data, and we have these 2-pagers that summarize a lot of the same parameters I just showed you, but at the county level. What critical facilities are in the tsunami zone? We broke it out, we didn't just do XXL tsunami zone, but also medium and large, because they're not so large and more realistic as far as what we can expect. And then my last thing is I have 2 slides here that show some recommended reading. This one is a fact sheet that John and I put together several years ago after, we're working with emergency managers all the time, and a lot of questions that come up are the same. And we thought, we ought to put out a paper that's easy to read that answers some of these questions. And so that URL at the top there, I know it's not easy to write down, but it's on our website. You can find it. It's on the front page. We call it a fact sheet. Cascadia Earthquake Knowledge Points for Emergency Managers and the Public. It's definitely available to the public. But we worked directly with Jenny and Tiffany Brown when we were writing it, and I recommend that you take a look at it for some, bedtime reading. And then here are 2 actually more fun reads that I recommend to people if they want to know more about the story of Cascadia. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with Bonnie Henderson's book, The Next Tsunami. It's a great read.
I have a couple, for borrowing. I picked up some recently on these, not the Oregon one, that one looks interesting, but.
Well, so the Orphan Tsunami of 1700 is actually a really large USGS publication. But I recommend just reading the, if you Google it, the Orphan Tsunami of 1700, this will come up right away. It's a free download and it's broken up into all its chapters. Just read the introduction. It's several pages, but it's a great summary. Our Cascadia event in 1700, Japan perceived as a distant tsunami, and they called it the Orphan Tsunami because it didn't come with an earthquake. So they gave it that name. And that helped Cascadia scientists piece together the story of Cascadia because they were talking with Japanese scientists and historians and they're like, wait a minute, we're getting these clues here and now there's these clues from Japan and putting it all together. And it's not that long and it's a great little read. But this book that Bonnie wrote, The Next Tsunami, weaves together the story of, the whole story of the science of Cascadia, but does it in really plain language that's great to read and weaves it in with, why am I blanking on his name? Tom, up in Seaside, a geologist who lived through the 64 Tom Horning.
Yeah.
The distant tsunami in Seaside. And, yeah. So that's a great way to kind of get the science distilled in an enjoyable way. And then I think that's it. Yeah.
That was wonderful, really fascinating and good information, and thank you, Joyce, for bringing Laura here today for us to really get our year started off with good facts that we can build off of, and that's gonna be so helpful as we're preparing sites and how much is needed where, so thank you, this is fabulous.
Great questions. And again, I'm happy to we can have virtual meetings at a later date, and talk about, we can dig into the data. Because what we have in the publications is one thing, but we have a lot more data that doesn't get published.
Yeah.
We can really kind of dig in and help you do that work. What? I'm realizing it looks like they're both my kids, only one is, but
Which one?
the girl.
Okay.
But I've trained her, she's a good little tsunami,
That's good.
She'll pose in front of any sign for me.
Felicia, do you wanna come up and give your presentation today?
I should say Felicia and I work together too in the same building down in Newport.
Oh, wonderful.
We're like the team of tsunami.
Perfect.
And I wanted to follow up on that number that I was talking about is much more long-term. When I'm talking about that up to 6,000, because of that, the numbers you're presenting are the ones that are actually displaced from the event. The other 3,000 or 4,000 that need to be included are the rest of us, assuming it's not me, the rest of us who are now isolated for 2 to 6 weeks. And while we may not have the injuries and may have a place to live, we won't have power, water, sewer, all that. So that's where, those are the numbers I was looking at, just to clarify.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, our visitor estimates don't include day visitors at all, which I don't think.
That's right.
We all towns have visitors that just come for the day.
I tried to incorporate a guesstimate of that, it's purely a guess.
But it is something we're thinking about, that holistic.
The long term.
They're all gonna be, whoever's here is here.
Yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself, Felicia, and tell us what you're working on for us?
Yeah, so hello everyone, my name is Felicia Schultz, and I'm the coastal hazard specialist with Oregon Sea Grants and Oyster Extension. And before I go more into what I do for them, I will explain who they are. Because sometimes people are like, what is Oregon Sea Grant and what Oregon State Extension is doing and who are they work related. So I do that. And also I wanted to say that you will notice I have an accent. So if there are anything having issues to understand academically, no problem with me. I'm originally from France. I'm from the island of Corsica in the Mediterranean Sea. So that's, I say that because sometimes people are wondering like, well, where is she from, and can I ask? So it's, that's why it's up there, yeah.
Long way from Depoe.
Yeah, not very far
Alright,
away,
we
for
got it.
sure, yes. So, yeah, we can go to the next slide. So, and we don't have to go through all the text, but that is, this presentation for you to keep and to refer to in the future. So Oregon State University Extension Service, I assume maybe like most of you are familiar with what they're doing, but it's been created in 1914 by the Smith-Dover Act. Basically, any kind of research happening at universities, like land-grant universities, is like connection of like how it can be like provided to the communities. So at first it started mostly on like natural resources, agriculture, healthy families, individuals. So basically all the research, how it could be like shared with the communities. Nowadays, it's not only like, let's say, one-way exchange, like, hey, we're giving you this information, it's for you, it's important to know. It's also like more like a two-way exchange as well, based on like informed like needs, like to make sure that we definitely consider communities' needs and then create resources with those groups. And some of the examples are, for example, Master Gardener program, probably familiar with this one, it's one of the most popular ones. Small farms, 4-H, like here in Port Lincoln County, it's like archery, they're doing, for example, dog training, family and community health, forestry, natural resources, and sea grants. So we under this umbrella. And so what is sea grants? So basically, you have the big like Oregon State University Extension Program, this big umbrella. Oregon Sea Grant is under that umbrella. But this is a national program. So we under NOAA, which is under the Department of Commerce. And so you have 34 programs nationwide. And they are on the coast and the Great Lakes. And the way it works is like a program between the universities and NOAA. So every time you're gonna have one of those like sea grant programs, it's gonna be housed at some universities. And it doesn't have to be an land-grant university. For example, in Washington, it's with University of Washington, not Washington State University. So it really varies from one place to the other. And the one in Oregon was created in 1971, and it's like one of the first 4 that's been created out of 34, with I think Washington, Rhode Island, and Texas, I think. So at Oregon State University, we under extension. Extension is like the division of extension and engagement. And our main office for Oregon Sea Grant is in Providence, where you have the university. But after we're like along the coast too. So we have most of our like extension Oregon Sea Grant staff is in Newport. So there is me, one person doing fisheries, one person doing working under the Clean Vessel Act, for example, make sure like people dispose of their waste, like boaters dispose of their waste, like in the right way. So they're doing a lot of outreach about that. And after we have someone in Astoria, she's also doing work on commercial fisheries. And after we have one person in Cruz Bay and one person in Gold Beach working on water resources. So, and it's about 40 people with Oregon Sea Grants. And you can go to the next slide. So what we do, so our mission, I will say really briefly, so to spark discovery, understanding, and collaboration to foster healthy, inclusive, and resilient coastal communities and ecosystems. And some of the program examples that I mentioned earlier, like commercial fisheries, coastal tourism, water resources, recreational boating, marine mammals, coastal hazards. So you can see like really mix everything together from like, okay, doing some work on, let's say, invasive species, but definitely looking at like the effect it can have on like communities, commercially, and also the ecosystem. So it's looking at both, just to make sure not only at the effect on like humans, but definitely effects also on ecosystems and how they're like so interdependent. And you may be familiar with some of the programs like the Fish the Dock, Shop the Dock in Newport, yes. So that's one of the popular ones. They're doing fisheries first aid training. After with marine mammals, there's a lot of like research happening as well. Yes. And yeah, can go to the next slide. So in all that is where I'm at, under like oyster extension, Oregon Sea Grant. And what does that mean for me to be the coastal hazard specialist? Personally, I don't really like the word specialist because I'm like, what I consider myself to be is more like a boundary spanner, like a liaison, if you want. And my goal is that basically to connect everyone, to be like, okay, what are people's needs, where are the resources, what can connect you, with other people, what can help with your research inside the university, what can help you community outreach and engagement. Because my role is basically to increase resilience to climate change and the geohazards such as flooding, erosion, landslides, tsunami, earthquakes for the whole coast. So I'm based in Newport, but I cover all the coastal counties. And even if Douglas and Lane counties are not technically considered coastal counties, I still work in those counties because, the cities of Bridgeport and Florence, so it makes sense. So what I do is a lot of communication and exchange. And so to illustrate that, what I'm doing is here are some example of projects I'm working on. Maybe the next slide. Okay, perfect. So that is this project is a really big one. It's been funded by the National Science Foundation, and the lead principal investigator is at Oregon State University. And it's called the Cascadia Coastlines and People Hazards Research Hub, Cascadia Coast Hub for short. And the goal is to prepare coastal communities, to prepare them and adapt to coastal hazards through research and community engagement. So what it looks at is the whole Cascadia region, so Washington, Oregon, and north coast of California. Because as you've seen with Laura showing where the subduction zone is that covers this whole region. But this research group is not only looking at tsunami and earthquake, they're also looking at landslides, they're also looking at flooding and coastal erosion. So all the coastal geohazards. And we're divided in multiple teams. So team 1, for example, is looking at earthquake, landslides, and tsunamis. Team 2, more like sea level rise, flooding and erosion. And me, I'm part of team 3. Each team has a community liaison, and me being part of team 3, I'm the community liaison for the community adaptive capacity team. So basically, it's trying to help communities to be prepared and recover from those hazards. And after I can give you some examples of the work we've been doing with that team. And also, we have a lot of undergraduate students and graduate students being involved in the research and having some training. But what this project does, is really focused, let's say, on academic research, because you have 3 main universities, so University of Washington, Oregon State University, and Cal Poly Humboldt on the north coast of California. But I would say also they're trying really to develop more good partnerships with different groups, like state agencies, also local governments. And there is a piece of it that I know the acronym is CERC, but you can go to their website. It's basically, if you need, for example, you're going to apply for a grant, let's say, and you want to have more information about what kind of grants you could apply to, or we're not really sure about, for a technical piece, in terms of information for this part of the grant, can you help us and having maybe a review or helping us drafting piece of the grant? Or today we've been doing with Laura, it's you want to know, let's say, a specific presentation about a topic. It's okay, do you want to know more about this specific topic on those hazards? I can then maybe reach out to either a researcher in the Cascadia Coast Club or some people I know also in state agencies or other groups, who can come and deliver and provide information. So it's really a place where, do not be shy to be hey, we need help with that. And after usually the group review the request and they can say, we can help you with this, or we can only help you with this portion of this big request. For example, next I'm going to work with the city of Seaside. They've been asking some assistance related to tsunami signs wayfinding, because they have some signs, they want to make sure where they're going to locate some signs so that when you got a sign, you know where to go next, so you can see the other sign. So just to have someone doing ground truthing or having presentations for new residents in the area. Because they say we have a lot of new residents, we want to make sure that they get information, so can you help us organize a small webinar series, for example. And when they have the tsunami preparedness, the Get Ready fairs, they were also like, oh, we'd like to organize a tsunami walk, can you help us with that? So we can help with maybe some of the logistics with that too. So here are like some resources that, some things to explore.
So do I understand then that you could be a resource, like if we had particular projects and we're looking for grants, that you have, did I understand you to say that you kind of have some connections that might be able to help identify those and even maybe help write, or did I misunderstand?
Yes, some people, like we have a bunch of postdocs, doing, helping with that. After for a portion of it, let's say. And I have also a newsletter that I share monthly, called the Pacific Northwest Coastal Hazards Resources newsletter, that every time there is a portion of grants, that, so people know like what the deadline, where to go, what's the link. So people are aware of those grants.
So they're not specifically grants from the Extension Office or the Sea Grant as much as a network
Exactly.
that can help identify the sources. Great.
Yeah, because some people are familiar with that, or, I can always fish for information too. Because if you're like, I'd like to know which grants are available, usually with the newsletter, is that all the grants that you can still apply with the deadline and see if there might be a good fit or not. But after,
Great, thanks.
And here's an example. So also through the Cascadia Coast Hub, there is always every year a little of money to finance some pilot projects, or in this case was a request for the community of Newport, so the Mesoamerican Indigenous Community Newport. So they're speaking Mam, and Mam is like a Mayan language. And so the thing is that I don't know if you're familiar with Newport, it's called Arcoiris Cultural Center. So they provide services to the Hispanic, Spanish-speaking communities and also Mam-speaking communities. And there was an ask from us to be like, how can you provide information on tsunami evacuation to those groups? So what we did, and actually Laura was the one who created this map, we tried to be definitely a lot more visual by having a map that not only showed, roads, because we realized a lot of people are not familiar using maps or like orienting themselves on those maps. So Laura was putting photos, pictures of like areas that people are familiar with. So we've been asking the person in charge of the community-based organization to be like, what are some areas that people are familiar with, so they know where they are. And after it was an exercise to be like, can you check if where you work, for example, a lot of people work at fish processing facilities, let's say on the bayfront of Newport. So it's like, okay, do you see where you work, and then which route should you go to be going to safety? Also, let's say you have someone at school, someone at work, where is the place where you all meet, decide to meet? So try to start having discussions about a family plan where you're all going to meet. So it was an exercise with little stickers, telling people, put a sticker, where is your home, where you work, and where you plan to meet, as a group, and explain how to read those maps. And we had also a presentation before that from the Newport Fire Department, because we didn't not only talk about tsunamis during this event, but also like people wanted to know more about fire evacuation, and making sure to explain the differences. Like the maps we have here for evacuation and go to that concept area is for tsunami. It's going to be really different when it's going to be evacuation from a wildfire. So we were trying to address both basically in the same session. Another project, we've been working with high schoolers to create a virtual reality app. So it's called the Distant Immersive Virtual Education for Ocean Literacy, so DIVE4OL. If you're interested in exploring that, we don't have the information on our website yet, but I can give you the information. It's like basically an app you can download on your phone, and you scan an area, and it will show you all those different like little pins on this area. Like you see like a scan just in my living room, for example, and it's what I saw on my phone. And after you can select those little pins. Some says how to get ready for like a go bag, how to read a tsunami evacuation map, what is a tsunami? And every time you click on those little things, and sometimes it's gonna be like a high schooler, you're gonna have a little hologram of a high schooler explaining everything to you, or it's going to be a short video showing you like, images from here, or photos, or you can move around, like for a go bag, you can move your phone around and you can see all the different items you need to put in your go bag. So it's definitely interactive, and so created by high schoolers for like more middle school level. And Laura also went with them in the field to get like to do a sample of like soil and find, sand that has been deposited by the 1700 tsunami. And so there's photos of that also in the app, and Laura was able to explain everything to them. Usually it's the voice of the students explaining that. And another project that I'm also working with Laura, and that, as Laura mentioned to you earlier, is like tool that is online through Namus. When you enter an address and it shows you the path to high ground. So there is a way, right now it's only like Dogami who can do that. We cannot create our own custom map yet. Like you cannot do that on your own yet. Hopefully it will come to be able to do so in a couple of years or next year. But right now it's the team at Dogami and we started to do that with some hotels, asking, and that came out from like an ask from like a hotel in Newport, La Quinta, was asking, I would like to have a tsunami evacuation map in all my hotel rooms. And I'm like, okay, so someone reached out to me and I was like, I know the right person for that, this is Laura. And after with Dogami, they worked hard to be like, okay, instead of Laura working in like Adobe Illustrator to do that together, they've been able to find a system that is a little faster, in-house. And so to now we have like reached out to 9 hotels have been interested in having the tsunami evacuation maps. And they have them in each of their rooms. And we're still trying to increase a little the outreach, but reaching out to the hospitality industry, I've been studying a little, I don't have a lot of capacity because I tried to even share a little survey with the hospitality industry, like a 5-minute long survey, multiple choice, to ask how can we increase their awareness and preparedness for coastal hazards, so all the hazards, and related to information they would like to provide to their staff, but also to visitors. That could be, 2 different things. So I've been working with partners to use that in the newsletter, to share that in the newsletter, like the Oregon Coast Visitor Association or Oregon Restaurant and Lodging Association. It's been a little tough. I think next I have really to reach out to one by one. But that is something that I think, the hospitality industry, because we have so many visitors on the coast, to be helpful. And also ways to be like, hey, we have this project if you're interested, just for them to know who to contact so if they want one of those maps.
Alicia, we're getting ready to, as the city, put more restrictions, if you will. Our hotels, motels, places like that will be required to carry something to make available in other. Is this challenging to get? Like if we say, World Mark, you need to contact GAMI and get this map to look like this,
I don't think, Laura can tell you how much she takes us, but I know she had a request from the emergency manager in Lincoln City, Boyle, to have those maps for like 17 hotels. So after, I guess it's something like, I'll let you.
I was actually looking, I was gonna come with one for Worldmark. Actually, my colleague Fletch has really streamlined the process so it doesn't take me long. I keep breaking his tool. And making 17 maps for Cassidy in Lincoln City, really, it took me a while, but we're getting there and it is not gonna be hard to do. I forgot, I knew that, I think Joyce had said that you were about preparing to implement something. And I just wanted to say that there's resources out there if you want to see what other cities and counties have done, language that they've had. I can't think off the top of my head.
Oh, I
You've
stole
got it
from
all
all
already?
of them, yes,
Okay.
yes. But obviously until today, I didn't know this particular tool
Right.
existed where you could show them walking.
It's
'cause
very new. And it is not, like Felicia was saying, it's not something that a user can do. We would love for that to be the case, but it turns out making websites is really hard. I suppose you could have it be, I think what a lot of the language is they say best available. It's something generic, like there's at least something in every hotel room or vacation rental, and if it's the Depoe Bay evacuation map, fine. But if it could be a custom map, fine. Honestly, how many hotels are there in Depoe Bay? Cassidy gave me a list of 17 and I'm done with it, so I could probably do another.
10, yeah.
Yeah, and they're really, a lot of them are, their evacuation routes are so similar that I think we could, I don't think it would take me very long.
Can you do it by assembly point?
That's a great question. Like basically just a zoomed in.
We'll talk.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I'm glad you brought, I forgot. We had talked about, Felicia and I talked about this before this meeting and I forgot, so I'm glad.
That's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
And after I'd be happy that if you reach out to those hotels and say, hey, we have those maps. If you can also pass my short survey, it's only, multiple choice, it's 5 minutes long. That might help, to spread the word, because I would like to have discussions and with the hospitality industry to get what kind of resources you would need, or like project to create together, or training you may want to provide to yourself. Yeah. And that's another project that is not, tsunami or earthquake, but it's more about flooding. Just to give you an example of like when I work more closely with like researchers at Oregon State University. In this case, it's like a project led by faculty at Oregon State University, but we're working really closely with the Department of Land Conservation and Development. It's more around flooding in estuaries. And for example, in this case, it's like looking at future, climates, also wave and water levels, and future flooding. It's basically looking at all the different ways you can have flooding in the bay, and we call that compound flooding. So from like storm surge, from heavy rainfall, from sea level rise, is like all that together, what the flooding situation will be in the future. And after that's to help to inform one of the projects the city is doing right now called the Estuarine Resilience Action Plan. And I think, they're mapping the whole county, I think including Depoe Bay, I think they've been doing some outreach here too. And the goal right now is really refocusing for this model first on one estuary, which is Yakuna Bay, and looking at how some projects, let's say they want to do, looking for funding, implement some projects, and by having this model, they can say yes, that can help you maybe to get some money from different grants, because this area really needs to get some funding to address this kind of flooding. Flooding is going to increase over time. So this is another example of project that is more more technical with flooding, but another part that is doing more community outreach and engagement to make sure that people on the ground find this tool useful. What are some projects on the ground already people want to implement or in design, and how to take the model to use, how to use it for their design for the project. And that is something if you want to find more information about all the different hazards, it's something I created even before I was in this position. So before being the coastal hazard specialist, I was an Oregon Sea Grant Fellow. And so that was my project. So basically on the story map, which is basically a little website, you have all the different coastal hazards, and you click on each of those little hazards, and you have resources about the hazard from different state agencies, local government. And further down, you have a map with different case studies. So for example, if you go on tsunami, it will show you here's the federal program that Seaside has been doing for for their town. The list is not exhaustive. I'm always looking for new case studies to add on how people are adapting or getting really prepared to different hazards. Because that is a good way for different communities to know what others are doing, what are the sources of grants and funding, where the lessons learned for that specific issue, just to be aware of what others are doing. And so you can visit the story map. I know for this meeting or so, I've been putting together in one document all the different resources under each of those little vignettes. So you have one long document with hyperlinks that you can have access to and explore instead of navigating through each little windows. And other projects I'm working on right now, I'm the lead on like a working group to create planting guides for erosion control on the Oregon coast, because I had a lot of couple of homeowners and also other people asking me, what can I plant on my property to help with erosion? I don't know what to plant. And so I've been asking about that to different state agencies and other groups, non-profit watershed councils, and like, do we have something? They're like, no, we don't have anything, it should be great to have that. So right now, we're like developing these planting guides. And also there's a survey mission to you to the hospitality industry. And also Tsunami Quest as a product of like Oregon Sea Grants. So it's like the Oregon Coast Quest book. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but some of them
I
are
want one for Depoe Bay.
if you want one for Depoe Bay, I can give you the name of the person.
Totally want one for Depoe.
Okay.
Don't know what it'll be yet, but it's been on my radar.
And it can be anything. I know they have 7 of them that are like Tsunami Quest, but it can be like any kind of quest.
I know, I checked them all out.
Perfect.
I haven't done any yet, but I will. Kathy and I talked about doing one once.
It's on our to-do list.
Yeah.
Looks like fun.
And I'm sure Kate Goodway should be happy to help with that. Yeah, and I think that's it. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
How dare that person put an umbrella on in front of the horn? I mean, come on.
Anyone have any further questions for Felicia? Thank you so much. That was really enlightening and powerful work that you're doing also for us. It's really, really appreciated.
Thanks. So yes, I do a little of everything. So.
That's our go-to girl. That's what we like. Thank you. Alrighty. Under new business, cash supplies. Is that something you're working on, Karen, or? Anchor storage. Oh, that's anchor storage.
The other thing I was gonna tell you on that is that you guys are the proud owner of H21. These are H21 over at Anchor Storage, to be set up for your emergency supplies. I do need to be ordering some shelving for that before we start putting things in there. But we do have the unit, it's $220 a month. It's a big unit, Brady asked for one to be on the end so that it was easy to get the deliveries in and out. So anyway, so that's been taken care of.
That's great.
So that's good.
It's really good.
So now you have a place to put supplies you ordered.
Is our garbage can here yet?
I don't think it's come in yet, has it? No, not yet.
Do we have an estimated date?
Are we talking about the stuff from Ready America?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
She said garbage can.
I know, but it looks like one.
Like a garbage
Yeah,
can. I don't think we have a recent update.
Okay.
The last I saw was that they had a delay in getting a few items.
Okay, that's fine.
But it was still something they were working on. They just had to delay in getting a few items in order to be able to finish it out. They didn't say which items that they just had.
We just want to be sure we have it by March 15th, but it'd be great to get it sooner than later.
I'd really like to have it for.
Gina,
March
would you
27th.
reach out to
Got it.
ask
Oh, that would
them
be
just
nice.
what the chances are of having it by January
Great.
25th?
Thank you, ladies. Okay, let's open up the floor for public comments. We've got a lot of public comments here. Come on up, Laura. Do a public comment.
I just, I thought about this when Felicia was talking, and what you guys were just talking about reminded me, Dogami and also Oregon Emergency Management has developed a guide for a community to put on evacuation drills.
Oh, good.
And that seems like something that you all
We need
would like to
that.
sink your teeth into at some point.
Yes.
And so that's something that,
Top of our list.
I'm not actually an expert in doing this, but I could help you facilitate, and we have this manual, a document that we put together to help a community figure out all the different pieces of evacuation drills.
Is that something you can email us?
Yeah.
Oh, that would be fabulous.
And we're updating it, OEM is updating it right now because it was, you know, written several years ago. Sue Graves helped us write
Oh,
it.
she's awesome.
Okay.
Perfect.
So anyway, I just thought you guys would be interested in that.
Very, absolutely, top of our list. We had never had one.
Yeah, they're hard to do and they're hard to maintain and they're hard to build,
Interest.
blocking 101, you know, and a lot of pieces. And then also along the same vein, over the years, Dogami and OEM have also developed guidance documents for wayfinding signage, which you guys have signage in town, but if you're ever wanting to like put any effort into that in any way, we can also, there's also some help and resources for that as well, but I can send that in an email too.
Oh, cool.
So
That would
that's
be
all.
great.
I would wonder if we had enough.
Never have enough.
Yeah, I guess you can have too many signs in a city.
You're
But
right.
sometimes I wonder if we don't have enough,
And it feels like it should, for things that we've heard, like it would say, so if you feel, like what she said, if you feel a shake, you have 20 minutes to make it to high ground. We don't
I know.
have any signs like down
No.
that say anything like that.
Especially for tourists.
That's exactly right. I'm picturing all those people that are not, they're only day people, they aren't the night people who might have run into something in their rooms, because we're gonna get some of those maps that you guys just talked about that they would have, but it's all the day people.
like the ones that were getting this weekend for King Ties.
Yeah, exactly right, that you literally can't drive the 101 because there's so many people.
Correct.
Signage along the, I call it the wall, what do we call the wall?
The seawall.
Signage along the seawall that actually directs them, but I think it starts off with feel a shake, I mean, it starts off like
Right.
that, because that's what gets their attention.
Walk, don't drive.
Walk, don't, yeah, exactly right, leave your car, right, and then from what we saw at this recent event, fire event, leave your keys in your car and walk up the thing, because otherwise your cars are gonna be bulldozed away if there's no way for people to move them or in emergency services, but not that people would do that, but that's what I'm saying, is people
Right.
don't know any of
Yeah,
that.
well, I'll just get in the car and take off.
And they're all gonna get in the car and
And
then.
stop and get something to eat on the
And
way.
then that's not gonna be, so I see like,
No
do
sirens
you see, and don't you, like, at least beginning and the end, 2 or 3?
I thought about, at one point, we were trying to get a grant through Travel Oregon to put some kiosks on the seawall in a couple of strategic places
Yeah.
where that would have that information.
That would be wonderful, you
That would
know,
be wonderful.
down in Harbor, Brookings Harbor, they have some really nice kiosks on their port, right
Yeah.
behind where all the tourists are, and they talk about, one talks about the impacts of the 2011 tsunami in the Brookings Harbor, and another one talks about like just
Yeah.
general
Yeah.
earthquake, you know, yeah, like that, that's great. And just along those lines too, Dogami has funding, so all of our work basically, almost all of our tsunami work is paid for through a grant we apply for every year with NOAA, through the National Tsunami Program. And we put in money pretty much every year for tsunami signage. And it wouldn't be for a kiosk type FYI thing, but those are wonderful. But we've been making like evacuation maps that are unique to a location, similar to the custom brochure that Felicia was showing,
Yeah, excellent.
that are like, you are here, and we're putting them in,
Like
you
they
know,
do with
state park.
Fogarty at the.
Exactly.
I've seen those maps and I thought I read somewhere they don't do them anymore.
No, we're still doing them. John Allen will put out sometimes emails and be like, does anybody want any maps? We're writing our next proposal. And
Yeah.
we use the ODOT sign shop, so we'll cover the design of the map and paying for them, and then
Absolutely.
you will, we're responsible for installing them, but
Right.
you know, we can work together on like where you want them, and
Well,
so,
how do we get that started, Laura?
you know, we'll.
Okay.
More
The Whale
emails.
Center would be one place, because there's already this.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's an
It's
obvious.
like the earthquake is your warning for the tsunami.
So, right, and then it would be, exactly right, and then all of the shop owners on the thing, whenever we would encourage them, say, hey, whenever you're doing, say, hey, did you stop and look at the kiosk about, just for your own safety, please be a frequent visitor and know what to do and things up. I mean, and the information would be right there, I think that's great, that's great.
They were really nice.
You're awesome. That's great. Really appreciate it.
A lot of this has been teamwork with Felicia, because we like feed off each other and
Yeah,
ideas,
you can see
and
that.
That's
You can actually
important.
see
she's
that.
out in the community and like,
Yeah, it's a nice partnership.
It is.
It's really a nice partnership, it really covers the bases.
We should talk about what
Paul,
your
did you
ideas
have a
are.
question?
I did have a question. I usually have the privilege of asking the dumbest question of any gathering.
Come to the table?
You might come up.
Yeah.
We have that bump and
So
sign in.
I'm intrigued by this 20-minute warning when you feel a shake. I'm intrigued because the shakes I've felt all along North and South America where I've felt the shakes, it's been at night, 4 a.m., 3 a.m., and nobody but me seems to feel it. And I'm looking around for everybody's reaction. Is this the time to go? And people just slip right through it. And so when we're talking about a shake, is it that thing that's subtle, that goes for about 60 seconds?
So
And
can you
stops.
differentiate for him a San Andreas shake versus a subduction? Because I think that's what he does.
It's a great question.
Sir,
But
would
that's-
you, sir, would you
Stay
sign in,
put,
please?
stay put.
Please put your name
So-
and your,
People want to know.
Right,
No,
but
it's
it's,
a
but
great
it's, but
question.
this is what's gonna answer his question. It's
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, okay, so it will be unequivocal. A subduction zone
Things
earthquake.
falling off shelves.
Yeah. If you look it up online, you can find footage of them. It's the shaking from a subduction zone event is unlike a crustal earthquake of any kind.
Like
San Andreas type stuff. There's even a difference in like, they talk about like China jumping and marching off a shelf versus subduction zone. Things maybe won't move off the shelves at all, but you see like the ground will roll like waves on, a wavelength of like tens of feet. And so it will be like I've heard it's like a freight train.
Yeah.
It sounds like a freight train.
You won't miss it.
You will not miss it. There will be no like, oh, was that it will not be
So
like
that's
that.
a distinguishing feature. I will not miss it.
You will not. You will not miss it.
Even you, Paul.
Now, I will say the December
Oh, yeah.
5th event was really interesting because it was not in Japan. Like it sort of was like a distant event, but the earthquake we were all getting notified was, seemingly on the Cascadia subduction zone, which in our minds, that's what I told you today, is a local event, not a distant event. But there was no earthquake. We didn't feel an earthquake.
No.
But
Kind of one in December.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But it
So
was different. It wasn't this.
it was not a subduction
It
zone
was not a
earthquake,
subduction, it was a horizontal event. and
but it
that's
was
why
close. It was just right
It
around
was
the corner.
close to the thing,
yeah.
but it was not a subduction, it was a horizontal event. And boy, does it take the research to figure that out during that's happening, like you have to know where to go so you know how to alert people. It was not a subduction event, which is why it was felt so differently.
Yeah, but that's most people, if they have any experience with earthquakes at all, it's a California style earthquake, and even not just California, obviously, but a crustal type shaking. And there's just, when you have like one tectonic plate or a piece of it sliding past another one, you just cannot create a magnitude like when you have the thickness of two whole tectonic plates, tens of miles thick, moving past itself. It's like orders of magnitude different. But that doesn't mean that those kind of crustal earthquakes, they can, as we all know, Loma Prieta, they can cause huge amounts of damage because the shaking is at the surface or very near the surface, versus subduction zone shaking actually is originating, 10 miles below the surface of the earth. So there's give and take on that, of course.
Won't be any question.
There will be no question.
So the way I answered that question for myself at 4 a.m. that December morning was my NOAA radio didn't go.
That is,
If no one's not concerned, I'll just go back to sleep.
Did your my shake go off? Were you alerted by my shake? My shake went off.
mine did too.
too. Yeah, I knew about the my shake, so I knew about the timing, and that's
My
when
shake would be faster. See, that's part of the whole challenge with the warning is they can't release the warning without someone
that's right.
approving that.
Well, they were refining
So
the
that takes the
location of
time
it, and yeah.
of the 20 minutes.
I'll sleep till I get approved.
If a tsunami is coming in 20 minutes and you're like deciding whether or not you have 20 minutes, you will know. The earthquake will be your warning. Like, you will. If it's a was it, wasn't it, and your phone isn't beeping. But it never
I'll call
hurts.
you, Paul, let you know.
Never
Thanks,
hurts.
I can count on Don.
Yes, Fran, did you have a question?
Not a question, just a comment. Thank you guys for all your work, appreciate it. So, some of you have already said this. I just want to, say that, it's really important that people don't get distracted by having to look at a map, right? And that they depend on their own senses, right? You go uphill and inland, right? You just have to survive. Then you can get to the maps and, have wayfinding for points, right? But one thing, I just was in Hilo, Hawaii, and they have a wonderful earthquake center, and they've captured stories from around the world and stuff. But if people are being waiting to be notified, to look at a map, oh, we didn't get one, I mean, it's, you see what's happening in California, just this misinformation and blame and stuff. People have to learn to depend on themselves. So the idea of trying to get maps everywhere, maybe if, here in Depoe Bay, it's pretty easy, inland and uphill. That's all, I mean, if you have to distribute maps, people are going, oh, I didn't get a map, or I don't know how to read a map or something. So I think you have to tell people to depend on themselves. You will, like what Paul was saying, depend on yourself, you will not miss it. You're not gonna worry if it's an earthquake you might not feel. You will feel this. As soon as you feel the earthquake, head inland and uphill, right away. That's all you have to tell them. I love these maps, I love what they're doing, but it's a little bit distracting, And the other thing I do wanna say, just because this is my baby, I don't want kiosks or anything else in our scenic area. I mean, there's other values too, right? People don't read, maybe at the Whale Watch Center, because that's an already built structure, or somewhere else. But, putting it on the seawall would be, I'd be fighting that. Thank you.
Thanks, Fran. Are there any other public comments? I see somebody, a rock chip up there, is that a?
That's the.
Oh, that's the rock chip, okay, we got it. Nothing else this evening? Commissioner reports, anybody have comments this evening? No, excellent meeting, thank you, Joyce, this was really so helpful, so informative. I appreciate it. If there's nothing else, we will adjourn the meeting.
Sir, can you sign in?
Yeah.
Did you make comment, please?
Because-
Thanks for coming. Oh.